But I find it's not just a training approach, it's a lifestyle. There is a mentality that goes with positive reinforcement that changes a lot about how you keep and how you have horses and the relationship that you have with your horses. It changes the dynamic for the better. Welcome to Season 5 of the Willing Equine podcast, the podcast all about creating positive relationships between horses and people. I'm your host, Adele Shaw, a certified equine behavior consultant, horsemanship mentor, and all-around horse lover. Continuing on with the different things that are holding people back from trying positive reinforcement, either in the past or currently. Something that was brought up was R+ trainers, positive reinforcement trainers being defensive and exclusive. So this is something, even as a positive reinforcement trainer myself, I have run into repeatedly within the community. However, I don't think it's entirely exclusive to the positive reinforcement community. I have seen this kind of divisiveness and just behavior towards our fellow trainers all throughout the horse community. So I've also seen it in the dog community too. I tend to think that this actually stems from just a lack of willingness to support each other and potentially also maybe even a bit of pridefulness as far as like, it's our way or the highway. We know everything. I actually ultimately believe that a lot of it is well-intended, that we're very passionate about helping these animals that we love so much and about supporting them and furthering just kind of moving forward with improving their welfare. And so we have these really great ideas and we want to really share it with the world. We want to preach it from the mountaintops. We want to make a difference in the horse world. We want to impact the lives of every horse around us. And to be able to do that, we must go after the people. And that's kind of the problem. We're going after the people. We are trying to prove to them that they are wrong and they must change and that we have the answers and they need to follow what we say. A lot of times this comes from well-intended trainers that are a little bit newer to training with positive reinforcement or are not actually out there. They're not actually very active professional trainers or professional trainers at all. And they're very passionate about what they're learning. They have reached a stage in their learning where it's just this revelation. It's super exciting. It's dawned on them like all of the things that they've done wrong in the past or that they wish they had never done. And they could have done this, they could have done that. And man, everybody should know this information. And I'm going to go share it with everybody. And then it comes off as very preachy, very hostile, very judgmental. And because those people that they are talking to are not ready to receive or the information is being pushed on them in a way that is kind of tone, like it's in that tone. It's very preachy. It's very, you shouldn't be doing that anymore. Didn't you know that is, science has proven it, this or that or whatever. And so we're not actually approaching talking to other horse people with the mindset of supporting them and encouraging them and being able to have a conversation with them and being respectful in that conversation. We're coming at them with this intention to change them, to make them change their minds, to prove them wrong. And then the social media platform does not help this at all, especially when you start arguing points. Actually, it's been proven that when you start arguing with somebody, or especially over social media, all you end up doing is causing them to double down on their previous statements, their previous opinions, and become more determined that they are right rather than changing their minds. So this type of behavior, this type of mindset, this type of hostility within the community and this just controversy, the argumentativeness, just the constant, I get it. I see it happen. I try and stay far away from it. I have been part of it in the past. I have been that person. I have done these things, so I'm not above it. I have made these mistakes before. I've created arguments. I've been a little bit defensive, and I've been a little bit exclusive or a little bit extremist in some of my views in the past. And again, that was when I was in my earlier days of being a professional with positive reinforcement. I was very excited about it, very passionate about it, and everybody else needed to change and get with the program. And how come they can't see it? I see it now. Why can't you see it? And now that I know more and have been doing more, and I've worked with more people, and I've just been out in the real world just doing behavior consults and working with tons and tons of students that are coming from all over the world and different places in life, dealing with different struggles. I just realized that nothing is as black and white as we want it to be. I think humans want things to be very black and white. They want right or wrong. They want rules. They want it's this way or the highway. They want, infallible, black and white, solid scientific proof, and this is what we do no matter what. I'm a big believer in the science. I'm a big believer in, pushing for improved equine welfare. I'm a big, I believe that we need to push back against a lot of these organizations, because organizations are different than individual people, and having a conversation with an individual person. So if we see an organization that is not acting in the best interest of the horse and is not following their own rules, or is, promoting unethical practices, or, et cetera, et cetera, I believe we need to make a stand, and we need to push back, and we need to really stand our ground when it comes to those things. However, when you get face to face with somebody or on social media with somebody and you are having a conversation with them, I firmly believe that we need to be treating people like we would treat our horses. So would you, and, it's just something to think about, would you approach teaching your horse a new behavior? Let's say they have a problem behavior. Let's say that they have been biting people. So a bad thing that we don't want to happen, and it's very dangerous and harmful, okay? And then the human equivalent is, let's say we have a human that is at our barn or whatever that has been hitting horses, okay? So horse bites person, and the human equivalent is human hits horse, okay? When we are addressing behavior change, there's many different steps that we take to help the learner change their behavior in a way that is going to be successful, it is low stress, and is going to have long-lasting results. We're not just suppressing behavior, and we're not guilting and shaming people into making changes, and we are, and then in the horses, we're not, which the guilting and the shaming and all of that is very aversive, right? So we heavily promote in the positive reinforcement community, not using aversives to change behavior with horses. I think we should be applying that same idea to people. If we are promoting not using aversives on horses to change behavior, then we shouldn't be promoting or actively using aversives to change behavior in people. And so when we're going to go look at behavior change for horses, we've got a horse that's biting. Okay, what's going on in that horse's environment that is causing them to want to bite? What's an alternative behavior that this horse could do to communicate and get the same reinforcer that they're after? Maybe they need space from the people that are walking across their stall doors. Okay, well, why are they in a stall? Could they maybe be turned out more? Is something about the stall really stressful? Are people walking by that stall door and hitting the horse or throwing things at them or just antagonizing them in any way? Looking at the environment, all that. And then we're like, okay, what could the horse do instead of biting? Maybe to get the people to go away. Or could we teach people to walk further away from this horse? Maybe we need to move this horse to a different stall so that there's not people walking in front of the stall. Anyway, there's a lot of different things we could do. And then we can also actively teach them an alternative behavior when somebody walks by. So can the horse go to a target when somebody walks by and then they get clicked and fed, or just a treat tossed in, something like that, right? So we can take that same approach with people. And this is something that I heavily believe in, especially as I have grown as a trainer, as a behavior consultant, and just gotten older in general. And then I have kids too, which this applies to raising children as well. And just having to deal with more and more people. And then as I've gotten older, just in general, the world is just not black and white. Everything's not black and white. And we want it to be. We so desperately want it to be, but it is not. So anyway, going back to the main concern where positive reinforcement trainers are being defensive and exclusive, meaning that you have to do it this way or you're not really part of the community. You have to be all in or nothing. You have to do 100% positive reinforcement or you're not really doing positive reinforcement. that, along with any type of critique on the type of training they're doing, or any kind of conversation that goes outside the scope of the quadrants and operating classical conditioning and all that, they can get very defensive. And I have seen this happen. I've seen it happen in the online communities. I've seen it happen. Really, that's where I mostly see it happen. We rarely see this type of divisiveness and exclusivity and all of that in face-to-face conversations, in actual established safe communities. We see this more in the online atmosphere. And so I do think that social media, it helps encourage this kind of behavior. It reinforces it. I mean, even we know the algorithm on, different platforms, TikTok, Instagram, all that, they reinforce sensationalism. So anything that catches people's attention, shock, awe, oh my gosh, or wow, that's crazy, or man, what's going on? What's the tea? Just let me get out the popcorn. The algorithms reinforce that type of behavior. And so generationally, I think it's just being reinforced. There's more and more and more of that being created. And then on top of that, we're being removed from the face-to-face conversation. We are having a conversation with some faceless person on social media. And so we dehumanize them. Some of these words that people use and some of the language that they use and the way they say it, we would never say that. That person would never say that to that person in person, to face. And I know this for a fact in many cases because, one, they've said it to me, meaning that I probably wouldn't have said that if we were face to face, or I just know that person and they just wouldn't do that face to face. I know there's been things that I've said on social media. I'm like, man, I would have such a hard time saying that to somebody's face. And I don't know that I would have. And so that's actually something that I use to check myself. Before I post something or before I say something, would I say this face to face with that person? Would this conversation be going this way? And if the answer is no, then I'm not going to post it. I'm not going to comment that. I'm not going to say it. And so anyway, there's a lot. We could have like a whole podcast episode on just this itself. And I understand that this type of hostility and this type of behavior is a big turnoff. It's a big, I just don't even want to try a positive reinforcement because of these people and because of this, their actions and stuff. I 100% get that. And I probably, if I was entering the positive reinforcement community now versus when I did, I think I would have a bigger problem, meaning that it would hold me back more. It would hold me back as well, I should say, versus when I entered, there really wasn't this type of stuff going on. But I don't want people to think that this is just exclusive to the positive reinforcement community. It's really not. I see it in all the communities. I see it everywhere. I've seen it since the dawn of time when I was riding. We had issues at the barn, and horse people in general, we tend to get very opinionated and very black and white in our thinking and very abrasive sometimes in our conversations. I think there's a lot of different factors that go into this. But something that I want to encourage you guys is I wouldn't let this type of stuff hold you back. I would come into the community. I would try positive reinforcement. I would not let this hold you back. And then I would be the change. I would be the change that you want to see. I would encourage you to come in, give it a try because you feel strongly that it will benefit you and your horse. Awesome. And then be different. Do it differently. Talk differently, communicate differently, and encourage people differently. Try not to be another hostile voice, another, extreme, exclusive opinion out there, and not be so divisive or defensive. Be different and help be the change that we need to see within the community. And then when you do see conversations that are really kind and considerate and even especially if they disagree, the two people going back and forth, maybe heart everybody's comments, like everybody's comments, and thank them for having such a nice conversation. I really appreciate y'all's conversation. It was a joy to watch this back and forth. I can see both sides of it, and I appreciate that this conversation was so open-minded and kind and calm. I think this is more of the types of conversations our community should be having. That's something you can do to help reinforce that behavior. And also help feed the algorithm the stuff that we wish people would be seeing more of versus the other stuff, which typically is what people see. But I also want to say too, is try not to let the behavior that you're seeing on social media give you the impression that this is how the rest of the horse world is, and that this is really what's going on in the real world. This is something else that I've learned too, which is that social media creates such a I don't know, it's a weird, warped version of reality. Because when I go to clinics, even for clinics of trainers that I don't necessarily agree with, or clinics of people that I don't train anything like, but I have something I want to learn from them or whatever, it's not, I'm not stepping into that environment and then all of a sudden it's like, hostility and what are you doing here? Oh my gosh, there's beef and we need to be watching them, back and forth and get the popcorn out, whatever. No, it's polite. It's kind. We learn from each other. We move on. I have people that come to my place and learn from me and do, immersive programs or clinics. I have clinics all the time where people don't necessarily agree with everything. I've had people attend my clinics, audit my clinics, that it was openly very clear that they were not so sure about everything that I was teaching. And I knew that they trained with a very different approach and they were just wanting to learn. And I appreciate that. And we had conversations in front of the whole group, meaning everybody that attended the clinic. And yeah, it's just a nice, respectful back and forth, answering the questions, and then we move on. And that's it. That's what the real world looks like for the most part. Not all the time, but for the most part. Whereas social media feeds us this idea that we're an extremely divisive community. Everything is hostile. Everything is, purist and black and white and strict, to this method or that method, or everybody's anti-bit or everybody's anti-all. Anyway, you get what I'm saying. Just remember that social media often is not actually what it looks like out in the real world and those face-to-face conversations. So that would be something that I would encourage you guys. Is that if this is something that is holding you back from trying positive reinforcement, that there's different ways to handle this, that we can be the change that we want to see, and that social media is just this way to begin with for every area, in every area. Actually, a really good example I brought up earlier, that I've been wanting to learn more about trimming my own horses. And so I've been looking through some different online resources, and I see the same type of behavior amongst trimmers and farriers, and everybody has their opinions. And, somebody posts you're super excited about this progress with this one horse, and inevitably somebody else comments, another farrier, well, this heel is too whatever, toes too long, or just something. They always find something wrong with it. So it happens in other communities too. And face to face, I doubt that farrier would have said anything. They probably would have been like, yeah. And they may have even asked a question like, oh yeah, this foot is looking a lot better. Hey, what do you think about this? Or, hey, what is your plan for the toe length? Or have you ever done radiographs to see, whatever. They would ask a question usually. That's normal social behavior. But social media does not present normal social behavior. So try and keep that in mind when you are considering trying positive reinforcement and you see some hostility amongst the community. Another thing that was brought up was lack of choice. The horse doing the behavior just to earn the reward. This is a concern that comes up sometimes for different people, that they're worried that the food is bribery, that the horse will only do it because of the food, that they don't really have a choice because you're the one holding the food. And I'm not going to extensively go into this in this episode because I have talked about this in the past in other episodes. And then also I cover this more in depth in my program just by nature of how I teach it. And it's just an ongoing thing that I address because this is something that's very important to me. It is very important to me that my horses do have a choice, that they are choosing to engage, but they don't have to. And I have had other episodes where I talk about avoiding coercion with positive reinforcement. And then I talk about, like I said, I talk about this a lot in my courses and in my coaching. So some of the things that we do to make sure that this is not the case, which I want to mention too, that with pretty much every type of training where we have some sort of idea of a behavior that we want the horse to do, there is a goal and an agenda there, and there is some level of we're shaping behavior, and it's to, what we want. And so, but the trick here is, and the thing really where my goal is I want to do this training, do this shaping, do this creating of a new behavior in an artistic way with my horse, not to them. And this is not unique to positive reinforcement. Other types of training can be extremely coercive and extremely limiting, and there can be very limited choice available. So I think inherently positive reinforcement can or has a greater opportunity to be less coercive and to facilitate more choice, to facilitate more autonomy for the horse. And one of the reasons I find this to be the case is because I can easily offer my horses an alternative reinforcer that they don't have to do anything for. So I can train with hay at their feet while having hay in my feed bag, and I'm training with the hay. So it's the same food that's on the ground versus what I'm training with. And because doing something to get the reinforcer, so performing a behavior, doing something actively to earn the reinforcer increases the level of reinforcement value for that thing. Contra freeloading, they will choose to do the thing that we're doing together. So they're creating this behavior with us because it's fun, because it adds value to what they're getting. And we can play with that and we can adjust it so they don't always have to have hay at their feet, but they can have that idea just kind of installed from a very, very early stage in the training that the other reinforcer is always available. And we do keep the other reinforcers available. And we shape these behaviors together from the beginning with the horse understanding that they always have a choice. They always can go and get the other food. They don't have to do what we're asking them to do. But through strategic shaping, through strategic antecedent arrangement, through having really structured training plans and taking an errorless learning approach and just everything that we do to really set up the training for success, we see results and we see the behavior come alive and become a thing that is very functional and is very useful on a day-to-day basis, or is like a fun behavior that we can do together. So I can see the concern that the food is the thing that the horse is working for and they don't have a choice. They have to do the thing or they don't get the food. But when you're training with a goal of making sure that the horse has a choice, that they can do other things and get the same or similar reinforcer and they don't have to do what you're asking them to do, that's no longer an issue. It is the thing, it is going to help alleviate that concern for you. And so I guess at the end of the day, my recommendation here is if this is the thing that's really holding you back from trying positive reinforcement, this concern, maybe you've heard other trainers talk about it this way, that, oh, well, they're only doing it for the food, or food is very manipulative or coercive or controlling, that the horse doesn't have a choice. And if you've ever heard that or been told that or just have that impression, I guess I would recommend my number one recommendation would be to find a trainer that understands how to make it not that way, that understands the power of food as a reinforcer and understands that a lot of horses have a strong learning history that leads them to believe that food is very scarce. And so a lot of horses have some food anxiety, and to different degrees. Some horses, it's very, very strong anxiety around food. So they have very strong feelings around food that it's going to disappear at any moment. I must get this food. And some horses were raised in a way where food was never scarce like it's supposed to be. And they had a good weaning experience and all that. And so they have a better relationship with food. And so we're going to see less, food anxiety, if any. And so finding a coach, finding an instructor who understands that and understands how to use food reinforcers or maybe even scratches as a reinforcer in a way that is not controlling, that is not boxing the horse into one choice, that is not taking away their autonomy, is going to be really important, because not all positive reinforcement focused trainers who are clicker training, all of that, understand this. And as long as it's effective, meaning as long as they're seeing the horse do the behavior they're looking for and they're using the click and the food, they don't really seem to mind too much. It's more about the effectiveness of it rather than the state of mind that the horse is in, rather than the overall emotional, mental well-being, physical well-being in the training and making sure that the horse is truly a willing partner, that they are truly participating because they want to, as kind of an enrichment, as something that they want to do that's fun and exciting for them, but nothing is limited to them. They have their social companions. They have plenty of room to move. They have plenty of food that's unlimited, that it doesn't run out. Nothing's scarce. They have all of their needs met. The training is an added bonus. It's something fun to do on a daily basis. Find a trainer that aligns with that understands that, and can help you recreate that with your horse and develop that relationship together. Okay, last one. Lack of representation outside of agility and groundwork spheres. Not much that is actually accessible and shows success in wider applications. Yes, so I can see how this is definitely holding some people back from trying positive reinforcement. This is tricky because it's nuanced as to why this is the case. The first reason this is the case is because it just literally hasn't been around long enough with horses. We don't have enough people training at high enough of a level with enough experience, with horses that have enough experience to be able to demonstrate higher levels of training with positive reinforcement in a way that people are used to with negative reinforcement. Negative reinforcement is the current dominant way of training horses. It is the most it's the most familiar, it's the most used. It is, no matter which method you're talking about, whether it's some form of natural horsemanship or, even all of the liberty stuff, even people who say they're not using any positive reinforcement or negative reinforcement are almost always using negative reinforcement. That doesn't mean bad. And just a quick reminder, negative reinforcement means removal of an aversive as the reinforcer. So just kind of reference my other podcast episodes on that or some articles. But almost everything done with horses up to this current date has been with negative reinforcement from the beginning of time. Now, people use different levels of positive reinforcement with knowing or without knowing that they're doing that, especially outside of structured training sessions. Like, for example, feeding time. When you feed and how you feed and like what the horse is doing when food arrives, you are positively reinforcing that behavior, whether you intended to or not. So we still use positive reinforcement on a daily basis. It's not like we just never use it. Like when you give scratches, and like if your horse really likes scratches, like let's say you go out to the field and your horse is just standing there or eating some food or something like that, and you decide to scratch on them and they're like, ooh, that feels really good. And then let's say they move their butt into you because they're like, ooh, scratch that spot. And then you scratch them. Well, you positively reinforce that behavior of moving their hind end into you to get the scratches. So everybody uses positive reinforcement to varying degrees on a daily basis for the most part. However, in structured training sessions with very specific training outcomes, like training goals, usually it's negative reinforcement based. Even if they're giving the horse a pat afterwards, even if they're scratching on them a little bit afterwards, even if they give them a treat at the end, that's not positive reinforcement. That's still negative reinforcement. And then we call that with a cherry on top, meaning just giving a little bit of something good afterwards. So one of the main reasons we're not seeing a lot of, representation of positive reinforcement in a wide range of applications, such as showing or, competitive jumping or trail riding, or I'm trying to think of other areas I haven't maybe seen too much in, which I've seen positive reinforcement being used in all those. I've seen competitive jumping. I've seen trail riding. I do trail riding with positive reinforcement all the time. I see it in Western dressage. I've seen some lower levels of dressage, so maybe not the higher levels yet. I actually take that back. I've seen some higher level dressage with it, not competitively, but the classical dressage, I see that quite a bit. We've got agility, we've got groundwork, we've got amazing veterinary training, cooperative veterinary care, fantastic. We see, lots of groundwork. I'm trying to think of where else I don't see it. I think the one that's most limited probably is I haven't seen much barrel racing. I haven't seen much, I've seen a little bit of carriage driving, like cart training, all that. There's other racing. We don't really see it in racing. Anyway, it's not very, even though there are examples of those things, you're right, there's not a lot of it. There's a few accounts that do this, a few accounts that do that, meaning social media accounts where you can see video clips, or a few trainers and riders that are doing these things that I've met or worked with as students, but it's not all over the place. And that's because it's still pretty new. And because of this, we're still learning how to most effectively apply, positive reinforcement focused training to be able to achieve these goals. And so again, going back to, there's just not enough experienced trainers with experienced enough horses. Another reason you're not seeing very much of it is because a lot of these horses and a lot of people that are coming to positive reinforcement are coming to positive reinforcement because they've had such a bad experience with traditional training, negative reinforcement training, whatever, that the horses are quite traumatized. The horses have a lot of baggage. They have a lot of healing to do. And the people do too. The people have a lot of healing to do. So not only are they not very experienced in training with positive reinforcement, we are now we're healing and backtracking and relearning how to do things. So we're undoing our previous experiences, not undoing them, but relearning how to interact with horses and working through everything that comes with that. So the process takes even longer, because I can tell you, the people that I have students that start with me who have no horse experience whatsoever, and they pick up positive reinforcement training like nothing. Like it takes them no time at all. They just advance along so quickly. And it's because they don't have any other experiences to contend with. There's nothing that we're trying to replace. They're just coming to this fresh, and they have nothing else to try. Like, there's no, like, if your horse starts moving into you or whatever, most people like myself who come from a traditional world, we have our first response based off of our earlier learning. And then we have the secondary response, which is now the positive reinforcement that we want to stop ourselves with, or we want to use instead of the first response. So we go to do the first response and we're like, no, we're going to do the second response. And then we do that. And then eventually the second response, the previously secondary response, becomes easier and comes out faster and actually becomes the primary response. But it takes a long time to get to that stage versus people who are just starting off fresh to horses with positive reinforcement. There is no first response, secondary response. There is only the positive reinforcement training. And so they learn very quickly. I find the same thing happens with horses too. If you have an experienced trainer with positive reinforcement and they get a young horse with no previous training, that training process goes very, very quickly with positive reinforcement. Versus even if you have a professional trainer who's been doing this for eons, if they get a horse that has previous training with traditional training, and now we're trying to retrain with positive reinforcement, that process is slower. So this is another reason that we're seeing a lack of representation, is because most people are trying positive reinforcement, like myself, this is me, as a last resort. Well, I don't know what else to do, so I'm going to give this a try. Or just after many, many, many years of doing something else. And so it takes longer for the training to really take hold and to see results and to, and then also sometimes there's limitations. They can't, maybe the horse has some injuries and some long-term healing that needs to be done. And, I've got a lot of horses in my herd that used to be show horses that were beautiful show horses that competed at high levels. And the amount of damage that was done mentally and physically to those horses, while they look perfectly healthy and happy and like there's nothing wrong and they're show horses, they should go back to the show. And why does this mean that positive reinforcement doesn't work because you can't now show this horse? Well, this horse used to be a show horse. Why can't you do it with positive reinforcement now? There's a significant amount of trauma there, and there's a significant amount of damage done. And so it's not a matter of whether or not positive reinforcement is just as effective. It's now that we are picking up the pieces from all of the damage done before. So it's not an even comparison there. This happens for a lot of people and a lot of horses, and it's just not a totally fair comparison. The other reason we're going to see a limited amount of representation too in some areas is because a lot of people who train with positive reinforcement, such as myself, do not believe that the show world, that the competitive atmosphere is the best for the horses, and that it is suited to my horse's health mentally and physically. I just don't take my horses to shows. I don't have any desire to take my horses to shows because the shows are very geared towards people and they are biased towards negative reinforcement based training. And so while do I think I could train my horses to compete in, let's say, barrel racing or dressage with positive reinforcement? Absolutely. I know I can. I just don't want to. I don't have a desire to because I don't want to put them through that type of experience in that environment, especially some of my horses that are not suited to that wouldn't, thrive in that kind of environment. There's very few horses that I think would thrive naturally in a competitive environment, if any, actually, to be honest, the way they're set up right now. So we're going to see a reduced amount of representation of positive reinforcement in these types of environments, in these types of ways, because so many people within the community are aligned with what I just said, that they also believe the same thing. So until the show environments change, until the judging changes, until the environment is set up differently and the scoring is different and the agendas are different and the expectations are different, we're just not going to be there. You're just not going to see us. We don't want to support that kind of environment, putting horses in that and that kind of expectation of the horses. It doesn't mean we can't do it. And I'm not saying that every horse shouldn't go there and that they're wrong. And I'm not saying that. It's just that they, to me, are not a priority and I don't care to put my horses through that. And I don't think any of my horses currently, maybe one, but most of them are not going to thrive in that kind of environment. And it's just a lot of work. It's a lot of work to prepare for that, a lot of money to invest. And for what? I just don't have, it's just not my goal. I have a lot of other things that I'd rather do. I'd rather improve their cooperative care for medical stuff. I'd rather teach. I'd rather do behavior, consulting and help people with their horses. I'd rather take my horses to maybe demos, to go to we have different fairs and stuff that I could maybe concentrate on preparing my horses for, where we could go do demos and stuff. That's an option as well. Anyway, there's just other things I'd rather spend my time and money on, and I think a lot of people within the community feel the same. And, if we're going to put our horses through a certain level of stress, it's probably not going to be a show. We'd rather save it for something else. I personally find going on trail rides much more enjoyable right now in this stage of my life than going to a horse show. As a busy mom of 3 kids with a full-time job and all that, if I'm going to have a weekend, it's going to be on a trail ride or hiking with my horses, near the beach or whatever. It's not going to be at a horse show for me personally, even though I used to compete. I competed aggressively as a child and was very competitive, and I enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun, but it's just not where I am now. So yeah, I think that's another reason that we see a limited representation in those areas. I've seen demonstrations of positive reinforcement being done in almost every area effectively. It's just a matter of, does somebody want to go do it? Does somebody want to put the time and the effort into doing that? Does somebody want to, and then they have to turn around and show it to the world, right? So there's probably so many people that are doing these things that are not on social media, that are not showing it off to the world because they just don't care to and they don't have to. That's great for them. It's probably so much less stressful than trying to showcase it all to the world. And actually, I actively encourage my students not to worry about showcasing what positive reinforcement can do. If people want to learn about positive reinforcement and they want to make a change in their horsemanship and they want to do something different with their horse, they will seek it out. They will go look for it. It's not their job to convince the world what is possible with positive reinforcement. Everything is possible. I mean, it's really, for the most part, true. It's extremely effective. It works with all species, and it's just a matter of what we're interested in doing, what we're willing to do, and what we want to do. And I think just a lot of positive reinforcement focused people who within the community that have horses this way, don't really have their priorities on shows and high competitive training, high levels of competitive training, or just high levels of training for ridden stuff. A lot of people decide to focus on cooperative care, enrichment, changing their horses, really focusing on their horses' day-to-day life, doing more enjoyable recreational riding for fun because they just want to enjoy time with their horse. They don't really have a goal or agenda. And I think that's amazing. I think that's great. And that's where I'm at with my own personal horses as well, too. And so this is probably another reason that we're not seeing it used as widely or showing up as widely as negative reinforcement training is, and especially if you consider the fact that in traditional training, historically, unless you were riding the horse, they weren't worth anything. I mean, I can't tell you how many horses I've had. And even to this day, I'll have people be like, what do you mean you don't ride that horse? Well, why do you have them? Like, because I enjoy their company, because they're living beings that I've committed to taking care of. I will keep them. And a good portion of my herd is that way. And, but traditionally, if you couldn't ride, you sold the horse or you put it down, or that rarely happened. Usually just gave it up, gave it to the next person, whatever, retired the horse. And so the priorities are different with the community of positive reinforcement. Not everybody, because like I said, just because you use positive reinforcement doesn't mean we train the same. Everybody trains a little differently, but I find it's not just a training approach. It's a lifestyle. There is a mentality that goes with positive reinforcement that changes a lot about how you keep and how you have horses and the relationship that you have with your horses. It changes the dynamic for the better. It changes and improves the relationship. All of a sudden it's about, your relationship together and how can you improve their life and how can you improve their welfare and how can we enjoy this together? It's something we do together, not to them or that they do for us. So really, I think that's a big factor here. And, so if this is something that's holding you back from trying positive reinforcement, hopefully some of these answers will help clarify and just provide some understanding of why we're seeing a little bit of a lack of representation of positive reinforcement training in some of the different typical horse areas. All right, guys. Well, that sums up the series of what's holding you back from trying positive reinforcement. I hope it was really helpful. And if there's something else that I didn't cover, feel free to reach out to me. You can message me on any of my social media platforms or email me. That's fine too. And I'm happy to help answer any questions and encourage and also provide you resources and a direction to move forward if you're interested in trying positive reinforcement. Thanks so much for listening. If you have any questions, please do email me at info@thewillingequine.com. If you'd like more information on my courses, coaching, consulting, or even access to free resources, please do check out my website, thewillingequine.com. If you like this podcast or this episode, please do leave feedback on the platform that you listen to it on.